Good evening. Welcome. My name is Tony Parrott, and I am the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Sewer District for Louisville and Jefferson County. On behalf of MSD, I want to welcome you to this conceptual design meeting for the Shawnee Park Basin project. I do want to recognize that I am joined by my Director of Engineering, Mr. John Lockley, who will be teaming with me on the presentation this evening for the project. And we also have other MSD staff out front who are going to be chiming in and assisting us as well. I do recognize that I've been here about 6 weeks. And I know that there's been a series of meetings that have occurred for this project. I think the last public meeting in terms of concept design meeting was in March of 2015. At that time, I think there was discussion that MSD would come back and meet with the public regarding the progress we're making on the concept back in June or July. For various reasons, we didn't make that commitment, and from that perspective, tonight what we're saying is you know, that is something that we own and we accept, and we apologize for not making that milestone. But with that being said, we have had some meetings with individual stakeholders and also with council members, including who's with us tonight, Council Member Ms. Hamilton. Thank you for all of your help and involvement. We've also had a lot of discussions with the Metro Parks, who's a partner with us as well, and Metro Council. Sevi, Metro Parks Director, is here as well, and Marty, staff, thank you for coming. Tonight is going to be one of those nights where, you know, we've got this input or this dialogue back on track. It's an opportunity for us to kind of tell you exactly where we are at the progressive stage of concept design. And in prior meetings, we've tried to be more structured to where we have an opportunity for input. And so what we're going to do is try to give you as much information and update as possible. And we will also have a public engagement process, one that would be through the automatic clicker system. If you don't have your voting machine with you, let us know and we'll make sure that you get it. And also, because this is going to be televised on Metro Council television, we want to make sure that if you have questions, there's cards that you can fill out, and we will collect those cards and try to address questions as we move forward. So on behalf of MSD, welcome, and at this point I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lockley. He's going to explain a little bit about what we're going to do regarding the demographic questions that we're going to put out. Then I'll come back and talk a little bit about the project background, address some of the frequently asked questions, provide some responses to that, and then turn it back over to John, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the alternate locations within the park that we are working with. And the whole objective tonight is to come out with information, so as we move forward, we can make some decisions and get into an advanced stage of design. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lockley, who will talk a little bit about the input.
Good evening, and thank you. First off, does everybody in the room have a clicker? Because this will be important to help you participate. And then secondly, if everybody doesn't have cards, please get those out. If you don't have a clicker, please raise your hand and we'll make sure we get those out. The clickers and the cards are important for two folds. One, the clickers allow everybody to provide input. It allows anonymous. No one knows your answers. Sometimes we've had situations at these public meetings to where people just don't want to talk, don't want to speak out loud, or you can speak. Everybody has the same voice. Everybody has the same vote. So that's part of it. As Mr. Parrott stated, we are taping this for Metro TV. These will be edited and they're aired on cable station 25 in Louisville. We do that for several reasons. We offer this for folks who couldn't be here today. They can watch the same video, they can watch the same presentation. So please tell your neighbors and friends that aren't here that they can get online and do that. Secondly, the same presentation that you're going to see in the same polling, they're going to see that too. And we leave that open at the end of the presentation. We'll show that to you. We leave that open for several weeks after that. And we still allow people to go online and they could vote and they could do the same participation that you guys are tonight. And then because we are putting this on TV, we would like if everybody would please hold their questions to the end. That's why we have the cards. We hope that a lot of your questions are answered in the presentation, but if not, because for those who aren't here, because we're taping it, we need to take the questions and we need to read them out loud and read them in a way that the camera can pick them up for those that aren't here. So with that, the first thing the way the clickers work is it records the last button you press. So for example, if I was taking this survey, I pressed number 1, that I'm 0 to 19. I'm obviously older than that. Just press the last button. So if everybody could, this will get us an exercise on using these clickers. Press the clicker that represents your age. Where's the thing that tells me they're done? The counter there. Oh, okay. So is everybody just going to move forward? And so this gives you an example of how this will work tonight. You'll get to see not only you get to vote, but it's live. You get to see how the group voted. So please, your gender, male or female. So we got a pretty good mix of folks here. And then we are always trying to improve. The best thing we can do is improve how we get information out to the public. So first off, we'd like to know, how did you find out about this meeting? And in this case, you could pick up to 3. And it's the same thing. So it's the last 3 numbers you press will be what is recorded in the system. If you mess up, press some numbers, just start over. It's the last 3 buttons. So we got a lot with the postcard and then the Metro Council, and that is really great because we've been working with the council to try to get more information out. And then just to add to that, what are your primary sources of information about MSD projects? Same thing, pick 3. So public meetings and council district newsletters are the 2 primary. I apologize. This is to get everybody going and give me also a little bit of understanding on how fast to go. This is kind of like a little exercise to get everybody just used to the clickers. Once we get into the other questions, we will definitely take a lot more time. So thank you for telling me that. It's hard to tell when everybody's done. So to help us, what would be some of the best ways, or how would you like to learn about MSD projects? Is everybody ready? So, the newsletter and public meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Parrott to talk about the project background.
Thank you, John. I'm going to start with a little bit of history regarding our system. What this slide shows you is sewer overflow locations that were identified in our system in 2008. What I'm going to show you on this slide is those that are in the sort of lime green color are what we call separate sanitary system overflows. Those would be out in this area. And the blue ones are what we would call combined sewer overflows. And I will go through this and kind of tell you the difference between the two. But the focus tonight is going to be about those combined sewer overflows that are in the blue dots in this part of the system. We have approximately 106 of those, and we also have about 201 separate sanitary sewer overflows in our system. These overflows are community-wide, and they are subject to the, you've heard about the consent decree projects that we're doing, and there's a tool of projects that we're using to remedy those consent decree projects are going to be used, and I'll talk about those momentarily. But it's going to be about $850 million worth of expenditures while we do this program. And it is a program that is not federally funded. It is funded by the MSD rate base. And so we want to make sure that you understood the motive and the history of the overflow program. Those overflows are something that in 1972, the Federal Clean Water Act was enacted by Congress and put into law, and a part of that Clean Water Act called for the elimination of sanitary sewer overflows. Translation, sanitary sewer overflows are illegal. It also called for the mitigation or the control of combined sewer overflows in our communities. And under this program, we are required to eliminate sanitary sewer overflows and control or mitigate the volumetric discharge of combined sewer overflows in our system. And it is federal mandate, it is federal law, and failure to meet those dates will result in stipulated penalties and fines. And more importantly, noncompliance is subject to civil and criminal actions. And so it is being administered by the Department of Justice. It is federal law, and when noncompliance is there, there are penalties, and of course, violations of law could lead to imprisonment, and that's one of the things that we're not going to do. We're going to obey the law. Another historical point, what this map shows you, and this is sort of the base map of Louisville around 1880. And as you can see in this map, there are some existing blue lines that were existing streams within the city system back around 1880. In the early 1900s, we started building pipes to be able to take on drainage and take on stormwater and move wastewater away from populated areas. Those pipes are shown in the black lines, and some of those pipes replaced some of the existing blue lines that were a part of the system. They were old brick sewers that were built in streams, and they became what we call combined sewers, taking both stormwater and sanitary water away from populated areas. At that time, those flows actually were piped directly into the Ohio River. And so when you talk about the issue of drainage and sewers, it is a 100-year story. It's a story that infrastructure, not only in Louisville, but across the country, are faced with aging infrastructure and issues that are brought on by the federal mandate. An example would be we've got an $850 million program here in Louisville. The city I came from in Cincinnati, we had a $3.2 billion federal mandate. So these programs and these mandates are affecting a lot of Midwest and also East Coast cities, and this is the primary history on it. And when you talk about a combined sewer, again, a combined sewer, what this slide shows you on the left, you have combined sewers that take on stormwater during rain and sanitary sewer at the same time, and those lines transfer flow during a wet weather event, either at the time when they were built directly to the Ohio, but also the separate sanitary sewer system on the right side of the on the slide would show you those systems that go directly to the wastewater treatment process. We began the installation of treatment in the around 1958. It's a lot of the treatment that goes to our Morris Foreman plant, particularly in this area of town. But the difference is the separate sanitary system normally does not take on stormwater. The combined sewer does. And so the combined sewer technology was something that was built over 100 years ago. It was the best technology of the day, and in 1972, the Federal Clean Water Act changed that. So when you think about combined sewer overflows or sanitary sewer overflows, but our focus is what type of toolbox do we have to deal with these? There's really two types of projects that we identify. One is what we call source control projects, projects that will allow us to deal with stormwater or rainwater at the source. And that would be by the use of what we call green infrastructure, rain gardens, bioswales, those type of things. Focusing on source control with downspout disconnections on properties, residential homes, making sure that sump pumps are not connected into the system, again, because that is direct rainwater, and also sewer rehab to make sure that our aging system through rehab or pipe replacement is not taking on a whole lot of infiltration. So that would be the source control approach. The other approach would be what we call gray infrastructure, and these are more of your hard, large, complex pipeline projects, expansion of existing pump stations in our system, expansion of our wastewater treatment plants, or building large storage basins, which is the subject of this particular project tonight. So that would be a gray infrastructure project. When you think about the program itself, again, like I said, we initiated work in 2007, stretches out over the next decade and beyond. And a lot of the work began focused on the separate sanitary system. And because, again, those are priority projects that we started back in the early part of the program. As we got into the middle part, working on treatment center expansions and projects and eliminating some smaller treatment plants. We're in this phase now that has circled the combined sewer system. And the combined sewer system projects that are going to come forward over the next 3 to 4 years is around $400 million of expenditures. And so once we get through this timeline, 2023, we have pretty much completed a lot of the projects that have been identified, and we'll be able to at least report our ongoing compliance to the federal government. Now, this map is very important because when you think about the CSO control basins that we're talking about tonight, It is a gray infrastructure project, that deals with large volume remediation of combined sewer overflows. Large volume remediation, when we say large volume, we're talking about basins that can hold 20 million gallons of stormwater, or 40 million gallons of stormwater, large complex basins. This map really kind of shows you that as a part of our tool and as part of our consent decree requirement, we have identified about 9 or 10 basins across our system in Louisville and in Jefferson County that are required or necessary for us to come into compliance with the federal mandate. And so, you know, me coming in to this in the last 6 weeks, one of the first questions I heard was, you know, why are we doing this in this area? Well, actually, it's a remedy that we're doing throughout the system. And this, like I said, we have 9 or 10 basins, and this map kind of shows you where they are. If you take a look at this map, we have some that are out in the eastern part of the county, out near the Watterson Expressway, and then we also have 1, 2, 3, several basins along the Ohio River corridor, because those are needed because of the way our systems are laid out. So this map is very important to say is that our CSO storage basins are a tool, a remedy in our toolbox that we're using throughout our system. And we want to make sure that that emphasis is made, that it is an effective tool that we're utilizing going forward. As we start to drill down into the Shawnee Park Basin area, this is sort of a schematic of the sewer system itself. Again, this is a sewer system that was built probably well over 100 years ago. And so we need to think about, you know, what the issue is when we talk about the Clean Water Act requirement. But this is kind of shows you the schematic look of the sewers that are in this part of town. And as we drill down a little further, we'll be able to show you what the problem is. The problem is, as I mentioned before, combined sewer overflows, those that are mandated to be mitigated and controlled from an overflow volume perspective. In 1910, there were a lot of sewers that were built, as I mentioned, to take sewer and stormwater away from populated areas and taking it into the Ohio River. This slide kind of shows you the magnitude of those sewers in terms of size. Those were built back in 1910. And again, those were technologies that were best in practice for the industry. And in 1951, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built the flood pump station, the flood levee along the Ohio River. And in this area, combined sewer overflows that run from this area directly out to the Ohio River, runs directly out to the Ohio River. Again, these are the size of those existing tunnels that exist today under Shawnee Park, and they've been there since 1910. So the issue they are identified as combined sewers. And so the remedy or the issue that we have to remedy is how do we control the overflow that is coming from those sewers during a rain event. So as you drill down even further, the problem is there are identified combined sewer overflows that exist right at the Shawnee Park area, down in the Broadway area there. And those large CSOs are CSOs that even if we get a 1/10 of an inch of rain, you will see overflow directly into the Ohio River. And volumetrically, you're talking about about 115 million gallons of overflow on a typical year. And so our objective with the projects that we bring forward are going to mitigate or reduce the amount of overflows from about 74 times a year down to about 24 times a year with this proposed basin. And if we go to the next slide, the project that we are designing in the concept phase is what we call a CSO storage basin. A CSO storage basin that, and we'll just go conceptually on this slide to say this is what it's going to look like. It provides temporary storage for wet weather overflows that otherwise would be directed to streams, creeks, or rivers. Once the storm or the weather event subsides, we then are able to pump that wet weather back into the combined sewer when capacity is created, and then down to our Morris Forest Treatment Facility. So basically, folks have asked, well, what is this going to look like? Here is the ground cover. Here is the ground cover. Under the ground, about 40 to 50 foot deep, you're going to have a basin that takes on wet weather. And again, that's a basin that is taking on wet weather from two existing tunnels that exist already under Shawnee Park. And basically, this wet weather, the blue indicates the water, will be pumped back into the system once the wet weather or the storm event passes. Some of the questions that we've gotten regarding this project: will it create the potential for backups? The basin is designed to make sure that it's at an elevation that is going to be below basement elevation. So no, it will not be a problem in terms of increasing potential for backups. However, we don't know the intensity of storm that is going to be in the future. Call it climate change, call it whatever. So no project, gray or green, is ever going to give you a 100% guarantee that there will never be flooding or issues, because we can't predict Mother Nature. What happens when the basin is full? The system will function as it does today. When the basin fills up, water then is converted or reverted into the combined sewer system, will overflow and discharge into the Ohio River. That is if the basin fills up. Will this project reduce flooding? The basin will increase capacity in our combined sewer system, and again, during a rain event, when that capacity returns, or it will have the potential to take on more water and alleviate flooding. Another question we get: will the basin be visible? The answer to that is the basin itself is no. The answer is no. It is an underground, it is a covered facility. There will be a control building and a screen generator with access points and hatches so that we can maintain the facility. This slide kind of gives you a depiction of what that's going to look like. Again, it may be hard to see. I'm going to try to point it out for you. This is sort of the cross-section view. This is the storage basin that's underground. This here reflects trees. This would be the area where the loop in the park would be, the roadway here. The building that we're talking about that will be there to support the building is probably going to be the size of a one-story garage. And in our discussions with the Metro Parks, and other stakeholders. That particular building has potential to be sort of a foundation or a staple for other assets, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later in the presentation. But essentially, this is what it's going to look like from a cross-section view. Again, something that is going to be 40 to 50 foot underground. It will be covered, and really the only thing that folks will see is this building here and our access hatches, which will probably either be located on the same side of the building, which is similar to a one-story garage building. So that's what it's going to look like. The other questions we get: what about odor? This project is mostly stormwater, highly diluted during a rain event. It is underground. It is covered. It will be equipped with rinsing equipment as a part of the design. We will also, and what we've seen for those type of projects, odor control is not necessary because of the dilution of the water. But then in this particular case, we are going to be proactive. We are going to have monitor and doing some type of odor monitoring and assessment. We're going to also have the potential for future odor control in the design of the project to make sure that we can accommodate that if necessary. So we don't see that that's going to be an issue, but we are going to take steps to make sure that we can incorporate that if necessary. So the project itself is a component of our consent decree. The storage volume is 20 million gallons, as I mentioned before. Being able to reduce or mitigate the amount of times the overflows occur on an annual or typical year basis from 74 to 24. It will be underground and it will be covered. The project needs to be completed and operational by December 31st, 2018, and complete construction and restoration by summer of 2019. So those are sort of the basics of the project. I do, at this time, want to turn it back over to Mr. Lockley, who's going to get a little bit more into where this thing is going to go and a little more detail on the design.
Thank you. So we're going to go in a little bit more detail on the alternative locations for this project. And I'm just going to go ahead and talk about some of the sites and just say that we are still in very early conceptual design phase. What you see here is we had to come up with some general sizes and general locations of where this basin is going to be. We had to come up with some preliminary areas and some preliminary sizes so that we could come and talk to you guys. But predominantly, as Tony was talking about, is the big issue is that we have the sewers that are in the area. That large pipe is here and the large pipe is here. So we have to collect that sewer somewhere in that area. So that's why our basins are in that area. So basically, the best two locations for our basin that we could talk about today and hope to get input from the public is the two locations. Location A, as we're calling it, is where the existing maintenance facility is at the intersection of West Broadway and the Parkway. Basin B, the second location, is in what is referred to as the Great Lawn or inside Loop Road. So just some functionality with both basins. Some of the things that are the same with both basins, no matter where they are. These basins are going to be gravity in and pumped out system. What that means is they will fill up, and then once the system is able to take the flow, there was pump stations in the basins that will pump and empty it out, very similar to a very large sump pump if you have one at your house. That's the reason why we have to have a control building, because the control building will control the gates, the pumps, and the electrical components, and we have to have that above grade to keep the electrical components out of the ground and out of the water. The water surface elevation in the basin, when full, will be below basement elevations. We are doing everything we can and ensuring we're doing surveys out there that the elevation when the basin is full will not be, and we will not cause basement backups due to the basin being out there. And then as Tony talked about, when the basin is full, the system will act as it does today. Today, you basically have the tunnels are basically long basins. That's how they work today. They're 15-foot diameter, 16-foot diameter. They fill up with water today when it rains. They stay full up with water, and then as the rain and the storms passes, they drain. So it's going to work the same as it did today. The one thing about the basin is that, and the other reason why it's diluted, but also because of the odor issues, typically when these types of systems, the odors come from stagnant water and it's allowed to stay for a long period of time to become septic. These basins and the way it's designed is actually to keep the flow moving, and they're designed with the pumps to be emptied within 24 hours. So there will not be the opportunity for anything to remain in the system that could become a problem. Provisions for odor control. We will put everything in place. We will put the ducts, the equipment, the conduit, the power, so that if there is a situation where there may be odor control in the future, we can real quick come in, insert the chemicals or the carbon canisters or whatever the odor control equipment may be that could help with that. We don't anticipate any odor control, that's why we're not putting it into it, but we are putting all the connections, the piping, the HVAC and everything, so that if it is, it's equipped. It's not quite as simple as plugging in a light bulb, but we can go up on site, put the equipment in, and we can go forward with it. There will have to be, as a previously mentioned, a control building for either side, and it is roughly the size of a one-car garage. And as Tony stated, we had to put that building there, but we worked with everybody. There could be things we could do as part of that building and to leave behind to where we'll talk about a little bit, whether an education center or some sort of park recreation site or something, but there's some things we could talk about. The park amenity is attached to the control building. There will be vents. This is a question that's asked a lot. Again, today, the system is vented. This is going to be a large underground basin that is full of air. When it fills with water, that air has to go someplace. If we don't have the vent in the system, then what happens is manholes blow or the structure gets damaged. So it will be a vent system, but again, it works the way it does today. Those pipes, when they fill up with water, the air escapes out of catch basins, escapes out of the manholes as it does today. So again, no different than the way it works today. And there will be a screen generator to ensure that we don't flood the site and don't have issues. If power fails, we will have a generator that will be able to operate the site 24/7. So real quick, moving into the locations. Site A, again, is the area where the existing maintenance building is today. It's removal of existing maintenance facility. The construction entrance and the way we will get to it to do construction will be off West Broadway. The maintenance access, MSC maintenance access, will also be off West Broadway. So during construction, our equipment and our trucks will be getting in and out that way. And then also, once it's built, we'll have to operate and maintain it. And that one picture you saw where you had the MSD pickup truck that goes and operates it, that's how we'll access it. And we'll basically be using the access that's there today for the maintenance facility. And then another part of this, since we are staying within the loop road will remain open. And I don't know if it's really easy to see, but there is a dotted line that goes around, and that dotted line shows the area of where the contractor will be doing his work and will be storing his materials, and all the main activity during the construction of this project will be in that area of Loop Road. So advantages, limited disturbance to the public areas during construction. The majority of that area I talked about is by the maintenance building, so it's not a big public area. It utilizes the existing access of West Broadway used by the public parks today. The Shawnee Loop Road remains open. And we avoid the flood protection system. The further we can stay away from the flood protection system, it's better, because there's pipes and conveyances as part of the flood protection system that we really don't want to get into or damage. And then the potential, as I mentioned, our building, nothing has been nothing has been established, but there's opportunities. We have to have the building. We can turn that building into maybe an education center, a recreation pavilion, something that could be used by the public in the park. Some disadvantage, being that close to the corner of the intersection, there's proximity to residents. There is removal of a lot of mature trees in that one corner of the park. It's deep excavation. Moving it further away down from the sewer pipes, we have to go deeper, so it's deeper excavation. And as I showed you, because we're staying in that corner of the park, it's limited construction flexibility. So Site B, or the Great Lawn site. The main sewers come in here, the main sewers come in here, the flood pump station. The flood pump station was put there to help to control the combined sewers by the Corps engineer for a reason. This is where all the main sewers come in. So this was the other location we could put the basin. The construction entrance would be off Southwestern Parkway. They could take the exit, take Muhammad Ali, come in, and then take Riverside back out. The construction loop will be partially closed. Putting it here will be there'll be a portion of the road that will be closed, but we can still work with parks to where you could come into the park with this access, go around the access, and then use this access. But there will be a portion of the park that is closed. And the Great Lawn will be impacted during construction. It's obvious, we're in the Great Lawn, we're up near our existing flood pump station where the sewers are, and then some of the staging and storage area the contractor will use will be this portion of the lawn. So that's where some of the will be used. Some of the advantage, we're further away from residents. They'll be screened, there'll be the trees, and the noise will be further away, pushed away from the residents. It's a reduction of tree impact. The only real trees that will be taken out with the Great Lawn option is where we do those collector lines where we have to go where the sewers are. It utilizes the same route that we use today to access the flood pump station. So the way we go to maintain the flood pump station is the same route we could use today. More construction flexibility. It's pretty obvious having the bigger area of the Great Lawn is more construction flexibility. A lot of contractors come in here and do the job. Reduced basin depth. The basin is 15 feet shallower in that area, which also helps with constructability, helps with the time of getting in and out. It reduces and avoids flood protection is the same, and the same as with both options. Our control building, we could possibly turn it into potential education center or recreation pavilion. Some disadvantage to point out is we are disturbing a greater area of the area of the park. And then, as I mentioned, a section of the park road will be closed during construction. And although it is 15 feet shallower, it is still deep excavation. It's 50 feet. And we just kind of wanted to put them back up together so everybody could see them. Again, here is Area B, the existing maintenance facility at the intersection, West Broadway, the Parkway, the area of disturbance where everybody would do their work. And then the one thing I did fail to mention in the other options, as Tony mentioned, this little square here represents our control building. We only put them on there as to show you that we have to have a control building in some area. The location hasn't been determined. So like, for example, here we have the big block is underground. The big rectangle or the big square, that's all underground. When the restoration is done, it'll look like it does today. But as we talked, there will be a control building. And on this site, we just put it here as a reference point because it was close to the existing access road. It could be anywhere once we talk with folks and get an option. And then the same thing here, we just put the control building close as we could to our flood pump station, figuring there was already a building there for that flood pump station. We could put that building there and work on it. But all these sites and locations can be further discussed once we know what sites we're going to be at. So to summarize the two sites in a table, and this is what we're going to ask you guys to also provide us some input. So for Site A and Site B, you have the proximity to the residents. And we just put a check on Site B has the benefits there. Disturbance to public areas of the park during construction. Being in the Great Lawn, you are going to disturb more of the park. The reduced tree impact, there will be less trees removed and significant in the Great Lawn. It's open today. Shawnee Loop Road remains open during construction. The entire Loop Road can remain open with the Site A down in the corner. Portions of the Loop Road will have to be closed. However, maybe we could work with Parks. We've already had an idea to where they could have two-way temporary traffic on Loop Road. You can come in the one way. So a section to where maybe you couldn't go straight in, but you could still come in and come in some different ways to get into it. But a section of the road will be made. Utilize existing access off West Broadway used by the Parks today. That's a benefit. The same access is used for the Site A. Utilizes the similar road today that we use for the flood pump station. That's the Site B. Reduction of depth. We talked about that. It's also shallower for construction, but it also is shallower for our operation and maintenance. It's 15 foot less that our guys have to go in if they have to enter the basin to work on it. It's the safety equipment, the fall equipment, the OSHA standards that we have to get into, so it would be a shallower and more friendly operation and maintenance building. Available construction flexibility. I mentioned Site B with the greater open area of the Great Lawn would have more space for the contractor to work. Potential education center or recreation pavilion, it's a positive for both. As I mentioned, we've talked about that for both sites. And then it's a positive for both. Being where we are able to be out of the flood protection system, which is a great asset to everybody. So here's where we would like you guys to get back into it. Please take your clickers, and this time you can vote up to 4. So the last 4 things you press will be recorded. And I just read through them real quickly as you guys are going through it. 1 is proximity to residents. Which of these considerations are most important to you? 1, proximity to residents. 2, minimizing loss of public park areas during construction. 3, amount of tree loss. 4, maintaining access on Shawnee Loop Road during construction. 5, dedicated construction entrance. 6, reduced basin depth. 7, available construction flexibility. 8, potential education center or recreation pavilion. And 9, avoid flood protection system. So if you would please look at those and pick the top 4 of the 9 that are most important to you. The question was what's 9? And 9 is avoiding the flood protection system. The flood protection system is the levee and the gates and the flood protection that protects when the high river floods. It protects the park and neighborhood from flooding. It keeps people out of flood insurance. It is an important part of our community. So before I hit enter, is everybody done?
We don't have, but we don't want it up there. So,
Well, I would say the way you could answer it that way is that between the 2 options, the way these are worded, one was a benefit to one side and one is to the other. So by voting one that is important to you, that would help determine the location of the site. And we are going to ask very clearly in a couple slides which site is preferred.
which side, both sides are on Shawnee Park.
So, is everybody ready?
Go over why you chose Shawnee Park as an OP, different areas, Chickasaw Park, or
Well, we already did that. We picked the park because that is where the sewers are. We have to be there. It's very similar to the bridges. A lot of people ask why we need another downtown bridge. Well, that's where 71, 65, and 64 are. I mean, the main sewer lines are there, and to move them anywhere else would cause a lot of say if you wanted it out of the park and you had to put that 16-foot diameter pipe somewhere else, you put it down the parkway, that would be significant impact to the area and to the neighborhood and to the homes. So the basins are where they are because that's where the sewers are.
Would it also possibly entail having to purchase some residential areas if it was not in Shawnee Park?
The question was there is a potential to buy some residential areas? Yes, if we couldn't use those park areas and we had to relocate the sewer somewhere else, then we would have to find areas within the community and buy out homes and put the basin potentially in areas like that. So you would be displacing residents if you also try to put it anywhere. It just isn't really practical to put it any other area but the park. So I'm going to move forward. All right. So to me, the top four are proximity to residents, the amount of tree loss, and then potential education center, recreation pavilion, and then avoiding the flood protection system is also very close to minimizing loss of the public park areas. So now just very specific on a 1 through 7, 1 being very unsuitable. No, don't want it. It's very unsuitable. To 7, and then we click it twice. And 7 being very suitable. Please, this is the one vote. Site A, which is the maintenanceability site, what would your vote be? In your opinion, the maintenance building site, is it very suitable for the basin or very unsuitable? And you get one vote. And again, like the other, it'll take the last one. Each person would get one vote.
Question.
Yes.
In the last meeting, some of the residents that are close to the park expressed concerns with, some of them have older homes, maybe the foundation or the properties can be affected if it's that close to the roads. Are there any type of provisions that could be put in place for individuals that get property damage or any types of issues like that from the construction?
Before any type of activity that happens, based on the type of construction, there are surveys that happen, and there's data that we gather beforehand. So yes, where we are in close proximity as home, there will be surveys. They go in, they take photos and pictures of all the homes and stuff, and then that way we have a pre-construction record of homes and conditions, and then if things arise during construction, we can look at they take a video and photos typically of that, and that is used to determine if there's problems during construction. Yeah, so moving forward, is everybody ready? If we can hold questions, we've asked to hold questions to the end. And the reason why we're doing that, so that we can get it on, everybody will have an opportunity to do their questions, but we really need to get them on the camera for those that aren't here. So I'm going to move forward. Is everybody ready? So the majority of the votes it's got on both ends, but the majority of the vote, it says this site is unsuitable. So can we please do the same vote for site B, which is the Great Lawn site?
Double agree.
Let's go. Or ask the question. Okay. Please, if we would like you to answer the question, but then everybody's questions will be addressed. And as I'm being reminded, that's what these cards are for. If you don't have cards, please write your information on the cards, and we will make sure that your questions or comments are addressed. So is everybody done? I'm going to move forward. And in this case, it's just slightly swung the other way to where it's very suitable. So with that, we're going to turn it over.
One of the things that we pointed out during my piece was the existing tunnels that exist under the park, the existing flood pump station and the existing flood levee have been assets or infrastructure that have been in the park for well over 100 years. The combined sewer overflows that were identified are also subject to a federal mandate to be controlled or mitigated. And so we have to identify a project to do that. The project location, it's better, as we showed with the other basins that we've built across the system, we build the basins where the combined sewer overflows exist to minimize the amount of piping and the swath of construction or destruction that would be caused to a particular residential neighborhood. And so when you think about sewers or you think about drainage, you've heard the term, it flows downhill. Literally, these combined sewer overflows are the collector points, and the further we move away from those collector points that are overflowing, the more damaging and the more complex a project has to be. So those existing CSOs that are identified that we have to mitigate or control at the corner of Southwestern and Broadway, the Shawnee site, whether it be Site A or Site B, are the closest to the existing sewers and the closest to the existing combined sewer overflows that we must remedy. So what we're trying to do is to get to a point so that we can move beyond just the concept phase of discussion. We don't want to do that without, getting this type of input tonight. And so we want to make sure that before we start choosing what we call a delivery method, and before we start choosing or moving forward with advanced design, that we have as much input as we can. This will give us information that we can use to help guide us in selecting. We've heard from folks via vote tonight, Site A versus Site B. And again, those two sites are the preferred sites because of the proximity to the existing combined sewers. One of the things that I do want to point out is that, if you go to the next slide, we have, as a part of this project, as part of this process, we have paid for a master plan working with Metro Parks that is identifying different things that can be brought forth during the restoration of a construction site. Example would be if there are a list of amenities or a list of things out of this master plan that can be incorporated into the restoration area of a project. MSD is amenable to incorporating those type of amenities and consistent with the plan that is being developed. And when we also think about other amenities as we move forward, this plan will also give Metro Parks an opportunity to identify specific projects or improvements going forward to the park system as they choose fit. So we have tried to make sure that we have that type of third-party review and planning so that we can use during the restoration process for the project. Just to kind of reiterate the timeline piece that we talked about earlier, we are in the conceptual design phase. Because we did not get a chance to come forward in July of this year, we will have another conceptual design meeting based on the feedback that we get tonight. We are targeting that meeting to occur December 2016. I'm not sure if we have a specific date yet, but based on the feedback that we get tonight, we want to come back before we advance into advanced design. We have to initiate advanced design in early 2016. We would like to start construction in the spring and summer of next year. Again, reminding you that we have the operational deadline of December 2018. That is a milestone date subject to federal order, federal fines, and federal law. And we also have to have the construction and restoration complete by the summer of 2019. So we're trying to make sure that, you know, we're getting input and we are getting information that is going to be helpful. There's information that obviously is available for all of our projects that we're doing on our website, identified under Project Win. You can go to our website and get that information. John, if you can turn the next slide there. Pardon?
It should be 15.
It should be 15. Should be 15. Our website has information. Not only you can go to our website to review this discussion and any other previous discussions, you can also get information on other projects, as I mentioned, throughout our system in Louisville and Jefferson County, similar type of projects that are going on as a part of Project Win. And these are the projects that are being brought forth for the consent decree. We have, you know, collected a lot of the cards that have been given to us. We would actually like to, are we going to take a pause and try to address some of the questions that have come forward? So with that, how many questions do we have? Similar questions? Do we have?
We have a lot of questions.
Okay.
And then what we're also going to do is we're going to answer the questions. Please hang around. And then we're going to do the re-polling again. So we'll do the questions, you can talk, and then we'll do the vote on the two sites again. We are going to review the questions. I'm going to make sure I have the right people up here that can help answer the questions. And then once we have answered the questions, discussed them, we will go to the two slides and allow the voting again on the two sites. So that way, if there are any questions that you hear that may have swayed a vote or may want you to change your vote, you'll have the opportunity to do so. A lot of the questions that I see here is it impossible to build it somewhere else within Louisville? And the answer is yes. It has to be there because where the existing sewers are today. That's where the overflows are occurring, and they cannot. That's where they're happening. It's nowhere else. Why is it necessary to put it in Shawnee Park? Several sites were reviewed, and it came down to the further away. Tony had the slide that showed where the sanitary sewer overflows are. The further away you put the basin from those overflow locations, the more expensive it is as far as you have to add more conveyance, more pipe, more disruption to the area. And then if you put it any other place, part of our IOP and consent decree is that we were not going to displace homes. So any sites, for example, if you want to put it on the other side of the parkway next where the CSOs are, those are all homes. And all those homes would have to be bought, destroyed, and then the basin would have to be built there. So the answer is simply, this is the area where the CSOs are, the 16-foot diameter large pipes, the 15-foot diameter large pipes, that's where they are. So that's where the basin has to go. There's a question about the trees that will be involved for tearing it down. The preliminary estimate right now, it's a 5-to-1 between the two sites. And again, to give a hard count, there's a lot of trees on the one site, about 5-to-1, about 4-to-1 in the area. Once we get the exact site location, and once we get some of the amenities, like is there going to be a pavilion, a building, or recreational, that's where we can come back and give exact counts of that. But as far as the tree count, but it's about a 5-to-1 ratio between Site A, because you have all the trees along the parkway and everything, versus the open field where the Great Lawn is. Is building it in Shawnee Park, is this the best way to combat sewage overflow or the cheapest? The answer to that question is yes to both. Part of our consent decree, we had to put a project in place. It's ratepayers' funds, so we had to not only put in what is the best solution, but also the most economic solution for the ratepayers. So that is the true answer to that is yes to both. Shawnee Park, what is the capacity of the basin? What is the capacity of the basin, and is it self-draining? It is a 20 million gallon basin, and it is not self-draining. It is a pump. That's what I mentioned, to where there's going to be a control building for the pumps. I don't mean to simplify it, please, but it's like a large sump pump. If you have a sump pump in your house, the crock fills up, and then the pump pumps it out. It's a generator above ground within the maintenance building. The generator definitely is above ground, and as far as where it is, yes, that could be part of the discussion. Right now, it was for the access and maintenance and stuff in a self-enclosure. Most generators are in self-enclosures that sit just outside, but that could be part of the discussion, to where it could be part of the maintenance building. We do have buildings where the generators are inside them. It just is a little bit more expensive on the building construction, because you have to have the ventilation and the fire protection and the parts of that to help protect the generator if it overheats or catches on fire. How will residents' concerns be addressed on what the garage will look like? We just wanted to give everybody an idea of the rough size of the building. We didn't want to come with any perceived notions of what it would look like, because that's what we would like to come back. Once we pick the sites, then we'd like to come back to the residents and talk about that. That's the next meeting they talked about in December. Okay, here's the site, here's what's going to be. All right, now here is what the building's going to look like. What would you like it to look like? So that is some of the details that we would like to get into when we come back for the next meeting. Will construction require blasting? Yes, there is rock in the area, especially where we're going to be working. But as we mentioned, there is standards and engineering practices to do pre-blast surveys in the area that can mitigate and take care of any issues or any problems we may have as far as that. Will there be potential of noises coming from the control building? During typical operation and when it's operating, no. The majority of the noises that you could possibly hear from the control building would be if we have to put odor control in, Then there will be a fan that'll be moving the air, that's filtering the air for the odor control. And to me, that would sound pretty much like a small fan. It would be that type of a noise. But the predominant odor noise that could come from the control building would be if we have to put in the odor control. And then obviously when staff is there doing the typical operation and maintenance, it is a site that our guys will have to go check the equipment. You know, they drive up on site with their pickup truck and do some of their work. But as far as any real noise that you hear from the facility, there should not be any. Will current overflow system be used in addition to the new basin? Yes. As Tony stated, we have to design the sewer pipes in the basin based on specific storm events. You know, another example is you go to the highways during the U of L football game are extremely crowded. You need 12 lanes of interstate to not have congestion around that. You can't build that. So you have to pick a typical design, and that was happened. Any design you pick, it could rain 2 inches or 10 inches, and then the community would say, design this site for that. So we do it. The very next day, a storm could be 12 inches. So you have to pick what is basic in the standard. So with that said, the current overflows that are in place will still be there. So if you have a rain event that could exceed the capacity of the basin or the sewer pipes, it'll go out into the river like it does today. And one note that I saw on there, it talked about the reductions of the overflows today. A typical year was 74, and it said 24. It's actually 8. So this basin will reduce that impact of the overflow to the rivers to 8. Is there a cost advantage associated with the selection of the site location? I think I answered that one. I was wrong. I correct myself. Greg Powell is my construction engineer manager, and there will be no blasting. Rock is 100 foot deep on this site, both sites, so there will be no blasting.
So there's no cost advantage in making the decision between site A and B?
Correct. As far as the
They would cost the same regardless of where it's at A or B.
construction cost is the same. No, it'll be, the other one is shallower, so it won't be as much concrete and it won't be as much, yeah, it's shallower, it's 50 foot shallower, so the excavation have to dig out, have to remove, plus the concrete and everything you have to put back in place is less. Yeah. The volume is the same in both locations, so whether you go to A or B, it's still 20 million gallons. It's just deeper, so it'll be a little shallower and a little narrower on one site. Is there room for any third alternatives based on community feedback? As long as the alternatives have to do with the 2 sites and that are in the area of the park that are associated with the overflows. And then can alternatives be built that will essentially eliminate overflows altogether? And no, there is just not anything you could put in place. Why are we not talking about a green park-based approach to the retention? I guess is why is a green infrastructure project. The amount of green space would be thousands of acres you would have to be able to mitigate the 20 million gallons. We looked at projects, and we like putting in projects. We had some areas, the basin that was going to be associated around the northern area, around 17th Street and some of that area, it's going to be a green infrastructure project, but that was because it was only mitigating 900,000 gallons. So you could do green infrastructure for smaller projects. That's what they basically are intended for, but these large volumes, the annual overflow a year is 115 million gallons, and then the storage basin is 20 million gallons. So there isn't enough acreage, there really isn't enough open acreage in the entire county that could be able to mitigate that amount. A quick calculation indicates that approximately 9,000 triaxle loads will need to be removed to build the basin. How will you deal with the impact to the residents? That was the questions we were talking about. We're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. The entrance for construction on the site B will be right there off West Broadway at the intersection. So that'll bring them more further down into it. The construction entrance for Site A is going to be up Muhammad Ali, and the intent on that would be is that you would come straight up Muhammad Ali, go to the basin. Okay. What? Yeah, sorry. Site B is the Great Lawn, so you'd come Muhammad Ali, use the existing off-ramp on the expressway, come to the site. We would build a construction entrance that they would get into, and they would use that same route going up Riverside to get back to the interstate. Sorry. Does the use of the sewers by businesses for their refuge cause our sewers to be clogged? Does this cause some of our local flooding? The answer to that, I would say, for this largest system is no. In the separate system where there's smaller diameter pipes, actually us as residents flushing a lot of the stuff we put in the sewer and grease and stuff, there are a lot of issues. But this is a large diameter pipe. This is, like I said, 16-foot diameter. You could drive a truck through it. So typically, it would have to be a significant something in this. You have to have a sewer or pipe failure to cause that. How will MSD be able to separate rainwaters from bathroom and kitchen waste as it flows to the basin? For right now, we have a program. The rainwater, we have a program at Center that we can help you with. We offer folks that you can separate your downspouts to get it off the system. We also have, and we pay for it, we also have an incentive and a program that you can work on. On the downspout, the program is you get it inspected. For each downspout you disconnect, we can give you $100. That gets the rainwater from your downspouts off the system. If you have plumbing or sump pumps or anything in the system that's improperly plumbed that puts in the rainwater or the groundwater into the sewer, we have a plumbing modification program that you can come in, we inspect it, and we do pay for that on our own. So anybody is interested in that, there's folks. Steve Tedder is our customer relations gentleman. He's in the back. You guys can go talk to him about that. But we do have a plumbing modification program that could help on that. Since the east end is higher, isn't the water flowing from the east to the west? Why then didn't you build a basin over? Well, the answer to that question is both. There is a lot of the one slide that we showed. This is the east end, Beargrass Creek, and the different tributaries of Beargrass Creek, they're getting several basins too. So the flow that comes in from the east that goes straight to the river or the Beargrass Creek tributaries are getting a significant amount of basins, as we talked about. So the east end is getting basins. The flows that are happening, and basically this is the area that used to be the old Patty's Run Creek. And that is what nature wants to do. That is what, right or wrong, to help with the sanitary conditions and living conditions in the early 1900s, we piped it, we put in a solid pipe. That is where the infrastructure and the flow is coming. But what is coming through this area that we are seeing is this watershed here. These are the pipes and the sewers and the combined system that flows to this area. And as you can see that this area is concentrated, you're not having a lot of the flow from the east or a lot of the flow coming that. It goes in a different direction. What will you do when you construct a basin to make sure children are not able to fall in the basin? How long will the park be closed in certain areas? That's a very good question. It'll be the requirement of the contractor to secure the site and have it policed. So I say this, I'll knock on wood, it never happens. I've been in MSC since '91. We've never really had incidents where people have been able to get on our sites and having issues. Somebody has to really be determined to break into one of our sites to get onto it and have a problem. So that is secure. How long will the park be closed in certain areas? The park will be phased. The estimated construction window for this project is a total of 30 months. So that's 2.5 years. Some of the significant construction, like for example, while we're building the basin and digging the hole, the park is going to have limited access just for that major construction. But once the hole is backfilled and stuff, after a year and a half or so, then some of the areas can be reopened because we won't be doing the significant amount of excavation. But off and on, areas of the park will be shut down. Keep going. Does MSD have plans to fix the sewers in West Louisville which are in need of repair? How would a sewer line breach in West Louisville impact the function of this project? That's another good question. Part of our consent decree, we have a program that we are looking at every inch of our sewer pipes. 10%, there's 3,600 rough miles of sewer, so we're looking at 360 miles a year. Every stick of pipe, every manhole is being looked at and assessed, and we put in projects in place. Since the consent decree started, we've spent about $40 million in rehabbing sewer, and we estimate about $3 or $4 million a year. We'll continue doing that. So all the sewers that are in Louisville, not just downtown Louisville, are being looked at, are being addressed, and on a 10-year cycle. So we go into a sewer, we look at it, we have cameras, we TV it. If there's problems, we correct it, and then we come back the following year. And I would just like to say, whether it's just a statement about the craftsmanship of the day, the brick sewers in the downtown area, even though they're our oldest, are actually the sewers that are in our best shape. They're in very good condition. We don't have a lot of problems with the brick sewers. We have a lot more problems with the separate system, that the clay sewers that are around the Waterson. We talked about that. Yes, ma'am, I am seriously going to say that. Well, the question is that she asked that what I said was true, and the problem is that it stinks in West Louisville. The reason it stinks is when water becomes stagnant in the sewers. Each catch basin that is associated with the combined sewer has a P-trap in it, just like in your house and your sewer. And when you have extended period of times to where that water evaporates, then the sewer gases are allowed to come back up. And also in some areas to where it's just because for whatever reason water stays. It's just like if you take a bucket of water in your backyard, fill it with leaves, let it sit for a month, it's going to come back, it's going to be spoiled water and smell. It's the same thing. So what we just tell folks is that if you have that, call our customer service. And the simple solution is we come out with a water truck, we dump water into the system, it fills up the P-trap, it also helps keep that water out. So the smell is associated actually with just water that gets stagnant. It is a combined system, so it is designed to handle both sewage and stormwater. So if you have a long period of time without stormwater, you don't have the flushing that keeps everything clean. And as I stated before,
It just comes out the ones that have steam coming out of them. All of them don't have steam coming out of them. There are those that have steam coming out of them, and that's where the stink comes from. But those that don't have steam coming out of them, I called MSB to ask them, why do some sewers have steam and the others don't? And they said, well, we really don't know what's going on down there.
well, actually the steam is like what I talked about with the basin. The basin is, the sewer is full of air, and air evaporates for various reasons. The steam comes out. Also, as water fills up, the air or the steam has to come out. So that's the main reason why you see the steam and the air coming out is events where water is moving through the pipe and it's pushing the air out.
And some and not others.
Yes, because you have some areas to where if you have a smaller pipe, then the flow is more significant on the pipe and it fills it more, especially with the area. When you have the larger pipes, the flow is much less. It's kind of like a river. You have a big wide river, the flow is much slower. You have a small creek in the whitewater, it's much faster. So a lot of time it has to do with the slope and the grade and the size of the sewer, how much it flows. And the bigger the sewer, the more air there is to displace. Sorry? I don't know if I have an exact reason for that. It could be that more people are home, they're using the sewers more, so there's more sewers in the home. It could be that your home, where a lot of people are, you don't. We have to look into it. I apologize. I don't necessarily understand, and again, I apologize. What is the impact of stillets? STILLETS from distilleries which end up in our sewers. Does anybody, I just don't want to ignore a question. The byproducts from the distillery, most industries have their own pretreatment program. Okay, well, sure.
The question or the concern regarding what industries are discharging into the sewer, we have a program, again, something that is required by the Clean Water Act, to have what we call industrial wastewater monitoring program. And we have, based on the size or the volume of discharge and the strength of the waste from the industries, we have to put those industries under permit. We have to grab samples for those industries, and there's a program that is set up to where if they are discharging what we call high-strength waste, or if they are discharging prohibited waste, they have to pay an extra surcharge for the high-strength waste, or if there is a prohibited waste, we enter into an improvement program for them to either pre-treat their waste, to eliminate the prohibited discharge, or they get into what we call enforcement actions through our industrial waste program. So we do have a program that monitors industrial users, high-strength waste users, and or users that may be impacting the system. And if they pay surcharges, and there usually is cost centers or cost allocations in setting those costs for industrial users. So easy word is there is no subsidization from the residential class for the extra strength or the high strength or the prohibited waste that we get from industries.
So first question is, how many acres will not be usable at the Great Lawn? That is something that is more the details we would like to discuss when we get back. I mean, a lot of that depends on what we are doing in the Great Lawn and what we are constructing, what we are putting back. Why can't an existing pump station be used for the basin? All the pump station does is convey flow, and the basin is needed because there's no storage. This is large gallons that get into the Ohio River that, as Tony stated, the Clean Water Act EPA is saying we have to mitigate and reduce that overflow into the Ohio River. And the only way to do that is for storage. And then the existing pump station that is there, that is part of that, is tied into the flood control system, and it's actually to keep the Ohio River from coming into Louisville and from flooding the area. So it's actually pumping out the Ohio River and taking care of that and getting that out of the system so it doesn't flood the park and the neighborhood. How will the ground surfaces be affected by the basin besides loss of historic mature trees? In each location, please. Well, again, part of that is once we determine the exact location, we can come back with some of the things that you guys may like or we would like. But for an example, if we put it in the Great Lawn, our thought would be is that once it's put back, it'll look just like it does today. It'll be a great grass lawn with the basin underneath it. The only difference would be you're going to have our control building. We mentioned that'll be off to the side, that the way it looks and size could be determined more. And as far as the other area, the basin will remove, there'll be a lot more trees removed in the area at the intersection of the Parkway and Broadway, and then an existing maintenance facility it will also be removed. Part of the discussion with the parks would be is that whether we put it in one place or the other, there will be potentially part of our control building a recreational center or a educational center or pavilion or something that the public could use. You know, maybe an open air pavilion with picnic tables or something. But a lot of that has been determined. But in all honesty, in both sides, other than the loss of trees, which was mentioned here, if we did the project with no other input, all that would be left that would be different than it looks today, minus the trees, is it would be a control building about the size of a car garage. The basin will be underground. Once it's restored, dirt back on top of it, and it's growing, it'll look like it did today. Could the community have a field trip of the underground or processes of the sewer underground in Shawnee Park? That is something that I will have to add. There's probably issues about having, but we could do some level of a field trip to get out there and just have some education as far as actually climbing down and entering the sewers. That might be something that we'll have to talk. If who wrote that at the end of this meeting, please get with us and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. Where is the line to the water treatment plant currently? Will there be consideration to dampen noise during construction? The line to the existing treatment plant is that red line, and I don't have the pointer. It's this large red line that comes down here, and that's what goes to the plant. And then the Broadway interceptor comes in and ties into it, and it goes into the plant. You have the western interceptor, the western outfall, and then you have the Broadway interceptor. And when these lines become overwhelmed, so you don't have the backup or the overflow at the protect residence, that's where these CSOs kick in. So when the flow becomes greater than these pipes can handle, it can be treated at the treatment plant. These overflows occur, and that's what goes into the Ohio River. And the intent of the basin will be is all that will be stored in the basin, and then once the project is back on, for an example, if it's in, and I don't know how great it is to see, but say if it's in this light location, the overflow will occur, it'll go into the basin, and then it'll be pumped back, and here's the line that'll take it back to that sewer, which takes it back to the treatment plant. This location, the overflow will occur, it comes to the basin, and then it'll be pumped back to a line that would take it back to the treatment plant. So that's the other reason. The further we move these basins away from these lines, the more of those conveyance lines we have to construct. So I think, please, if I did not read your question, in an attempt to help what's going on here, a lot of them that I thought had some of the same questions, I tried to combine them. If you think that I didn't do that right and I didn't answer your question, please let me know. The potential damage, as I stated earlier, with the same question, was that there will be a pre-construction survey done in the area to the homes in the areas. They do video, they do survey, they do the best they can. The last thing contractors want is to go into an area and then have damage to homes. It doesn't help them, it doesn't help their reputation, it doesn't help their bottom line and profit. So there is pre-construction surveys that are done out in the area. It gives us the information and the data, and then if something happens, we have that data that we can go in and compare to the post-construction or the potential concern. And then if there are issues, it gets turned over to the contractor's insurance company, and it gets handled that way. The answer is yes, but you also always, once something happens, you can still come back to us, and then we can try to help you. Typically, the way it's written and the way the contracts are, it goes for the first round with the damage claim and the insurance, because ultimately it's that. But we have had multiple situations to where the contractor and the homeowner didn't agree, So we tell the homeowner to get back with MSD, and then we try to help the best we can. It varies. To be quite honestly, it varies site by site. I would hate to say anything out loud, but a lot of times it depends on documentation. It's which side has the appropriate documentation to prove that there was damage, and it varies on that, to be honest. Yeah. Well, at the end of this, what you wouldn't mind if we get with Greg, and we can, Greg Powell is the guy, you may have already met him, get with Greg, and we'll talk about this.
One of the things that we want to be able to do, obviously, we've tried to go through most of the questions that we got from the cards, and I just want to kind of point back to this slide here. We know that where the issue or the problem is. The problem is located right here where the CSOs are identified, particularly in this area and in this area. And there's been a lot of discussion about, okay, why Shawnee Park? Shawnee Park, because this is where the CSOs exist. Go back to the slide we had up, please. This is where the CSOs exist. And when you think about the size of these basins, 20 million gallon basins, if we move those basins, all of this network of piping that is necessary to intercept flow from this CSO or this CSO will have to go or follow this basin. So whether you move this basin up here, whether you move it down here, whether you move it down here, all of that piping needs to follow that basin. And so wherever you go, there's going to be a swath of destruction that follows those basins. Those basins are the only remedy for the amount of volumetric overflow we're seeing on an annual basis at these CSO locations. We know that this is a impactful project. It is a large project. The problem exists with the existing CSOs, with the assets that have been under the park for over 100 years. And so the remedy for those assets and the mandate that we're facing is best located right where those problems or those overflows exist. If we go back to the other slide where we saw the size of the tunnels, these are huge existing tunnels. And to be able to, the farther we move away from those systems, we have to have adequate size piping to be able to get to the basin or the reservoir. And so these are tremendous tunnels. You can see with someone standing there, these are not very small pipes. These are huge infrastructure assets. And so the farther you move it away from the combined sewer overflow, the swath of destruction becomes larger. And so that's why we're trying to get through the concept phase and addressing the problem, and the problem exists at this location where the CSOs are. And again, it's a remedy or it's a tool that we're using throughout our system for other CSOs, and there's a total of 9 or 10 of these basins that are being built throughout the district. One of the things we want to be able to do is come back in December, but in order to do that, we do want to go back. I know a lot of you still have your clickers with you, right? We want to be able to, we've gotten through a lot of the questions. We want to go back and allow you to use the clicker again regarding Site A versus Site B, and also the process that we've put together tonight so we can improve upon that for our next meeting in December. So we'll go back to the questions. If you have your ticker,
the houses were also built in 19. So when you see the magnitude of the destruction that is going to be
what is going to happen to these 19
And we hear that. We've documented that. And one of the things that we do know, as we mentioned before, we are trying to pick the site that is going to be less impactful to the residents. And that's why we're here, to try to get that feedback to see which is the best site. You want to read that? I can't see it from here. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, it's like over 40 people died.
Yeah.
Are you going to take that into consideration as also as voting that we agreed that night for the Great Lawn?
Yeah, we're taking all the input we get from every discussion we've had with all stakeholders.
So, I don't know if anybody. We got one question. You want to do it? Ask over there.
So it seems like we've seen only some of this is required, and then the infrastructure approach is not feasible. And 20 million gallons is a lot of water, but when you move that out of the box and into many, many yards, there's the potential to spread the wealth of the financial impact to all of the residents here. So if we look at actually the whole neighborhood, then we're only storing 1 or 2 inches in everyone's yard. And that's only stormwater. So have you done, and can we not see here the financial analysis, not only on the baseline cost MSD, but the other environmental and social impacts of the community of a green infrastructure strategy for this neighborhood? Because if spread across the hundreds of acres that we do have, it could actually bring greening benefits to all of these homes, as opposed to a huge burden to the homes and to the market.
Well, I'm going to answer real quick. No, and the main reason on that is that this has to work. There is a lot of federal fines, and putting this on private property would require deed restrictions to where once you put this infrastructure on private property, they have to keep it that way. So now we're turning into private property land use, where we're telling people what they have to do with their homes, and then it has to be maintained. It has to be maintained forever. I mean, this is not going away. So if you try to put this on private property, you're putting a lot of the restrictions. So quite honestly, we can't, it's voluntary, and we can't rely on that. Plus, you were talking a much larger area than what would be required for this basin. So if everybody is ready, we're going to go around again. Please use your clickers, and based on some of the things you've heard with the post question period, we're talking about Site A, which is in the intersection of Broadway and the Parkway, down there where the maintenance building are. Please vote on your opinion, one click, from very unsuitable, number 1, to number 7, very suitable. Before I hit the button, is everybody done? So a much bigger swing on the unsuitability for Site A. So real quick, we're going to reset this. So now would everybody please use their clickers to vote for Site B, which is the Great Lawn. So I'm going to hit the enter unless anybody wants me to, any? So a little bit bigger swing and more on this, a little higher mean average for the very suitable for the Great Lawn.